Thanks for coming to this discussion. This is an ICTSD IFPRI collaboration. IFPRI is the International Policy Research Institute in Washington, and we're very happy to, again, from ICTSD, partner with IFPRI in activity related to trade and agricultural negotiations. I'm Ricardo Melendez-Ortiz. I'm the head of ICTSD. We have a very good panel of speakers. We want to try to go as much as possible in detail, but and obviously engage in a discussion with all of you as we read through the Nairobi results on agriculture 6 months later or so, and look at their economic significance as well as what we think may be issues that are pending for further work at the WTO. We're aware of the discussions that have taken place here, not least probably at the Committee on Agriculture that just met in the past 2 days, as well as with think tanks and civil society and intergovernmental organizations on some of these issues. We have tried to capture some of those conversations as much as they relate to analysis of the results in the publication that we have tabled. What we have done is compile a few articles that are looking at the Nairobi decisions in this little booklet that you find outside. It's really an e-book, very informally printed, which would also include, in addition to the presentations that we would hear today, a piece that was, which is actually just covering comments and ideas that were made by Crawford Falconer last time that we met in this very room, looking at the possibilities in Nairobi. So what we have done is look at export competition, decisions on export competition, on cotton, on the special safeguard mechanism, on public stakeholding, and then again those ideas by Crawford Falconer, and then collect them in that booklet. The decisions that were made in Nairobi are not insignificant. They obviously look as little when you look at the magnitude of the problems that we have in front of us, and at the amount of work that has been put by governments in trying to resolve them. But by no means they are insignificant, particularly the decisions related to export subsidies. But also some of the disciplines on export credits, credit guarantees, insurance, on food aid, and in export trading enterprises, they do an important job in advancing some of these issues going forward. Less impressive are some of the results with respect to cotton, and particularly tackling the issues of the effect of cotton subsidies in prices in global markets for cotton, and then the effect that has on the least developed countries that have been affected by these practices and have been trying to find a solution in the WTO to this for almost 15 years now. And then there's the question of the special safeguard mechanism and the request to continue looking for ways forward towards a permanent solution. The context in which these decisions take place, it's quite different from what we had even in the run-up to Bali. Now export prices generally of agricultural products, but main commodities, are in a very different situation than they were before. A great deal of the analysis that we had been doing accompanying the Doha round negotiations had to do with the volatility of prices. Now what we're seeing and going into Nairobi is a situation of low prices of commodities, low prices of oil. Some of the commodities have reached some of the lowest levels since 2009 now, and so that again has implications for the use of some of the instruments, for some of the issues again that need to be resolved in the negotiations here at the WTO. The bigger issues concerning agricultural distortions and specifically those that have to do with domestic support and as well as issues related to market access continue to be on hold or pending resolution in the WTO context. We will not be talking about them as only as they may refer again to possible ways forward, but or they are related to some of the decisions made. The approach to deal with questions of trade, I would say trade, investment, and agriculture at the WTO and generally in the global trade and investment system remains very much what has been for the past 30 years. Some of us have suggested that there's a possibility and perhaps an opportunity, rather, to start thinking about a different way of looking at these issues, including bringing a food systems approach to some of these questions, trying to understand whether it is possible to have cooperation at the international level that takes into account not only the production of agricultural commodities, but also food processing, and then everything that is related to the food systems, again, that is affected by frameworks on trade and investment, and particularly in light of the commitments that governments have made in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030, and the challenges that we face, not only from demographics and but also from climate change and water scarcity, biodiversity loss, which are all very clearly connected to agriculture. So those, again, are topics that frame this discussion. This is not in any way in isolation from that thinking of the larger issues and the larger context. But we want today to focus very narrowly, if you like, in any case, as much as we can, on the economic impacts of the decisions that were made in Nairobi, and that's where we would try to keep the discussion, as well as to help identify for some of you where there have been some advancement on these issues and which are the questions that remain to be tackled. So with that, let me very briefly introduce the first panel. We will divide the meeting into two parts so that we can have a good discussion instead of talking about everything at the same time. We'll start looking at export competition and decisions on cotton. On export competition, we will have a presentation by Eugenio Diaz-Bonilla, who has co-authored, together with my colleague Jonathan Hepburn from ICTSD, the piece that you have with you, looking at those decisions. Eugenio is today with IFPRI, but has been working on these issues for many years, not only at IFPRI, but at other institutions, including the Inter-American Development Bank before. And then we'll have a presentation from Terry Townsend. Terry Townsend would come to us through conference call from Washington, I imagine. Terry is a cotton analyst, formerly and for many years with the International Cotton Advisory Council, one of the world's most recognized experts on cotton markets. For the information of participants, both sessions will be live streamed, but cameras will be cut off for the off-the-record discussion among participants. So the presentations will be live streamed, but not the discussion with the audience, which will remain off the record. From the list of people registered to the meeting, we understand that we have some delegates from Geneva. We're lucky to have some delegates, capital base, who were here for the meetings of the WTO Committee on Agriculture, some of our WTO colleagues, and other participants, non-governmental participants. So just for the information for everybody. This is, as I said before, part of work that we do ongoing on agriculture, but it is also very much part of work that we do on the larger questions of the global trade and investment system and the ways forward. And so, again, I just put it in context there. So with that, let me turn to the presentations. We'll hear 10-15 minutes from Eugenio first, then move immediately to Terry Townsend, and then go to discussion with all of you. Let me start with you, Eugenio. Please,
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Thanks to the WTO, to the audience for being here, to ICTSD for organizing this jointly with us, IFPRI. We're with my colleague Joe Glauber from IFPRI. You know him very well, most of you. So we are very happy to co-organizing or co-hosting this seminar with ICTSD, and thank you very much for being here. My task is to talk about export competition, and basically, I'm not going to repeat the chapter. You can look at the chapter in the book, but building on the chapter, further reflections, thinking about paragraph 4 in the ministerial decision that refers to the notification aspects, and paragraph 5 that asks for a revision or a review in 3 years of the disciplines. And as a former trade diplomat, participating in the negotiations for the Uruguay round and some of the regional negotiations from my country at that time, it's clear that you always need to focus on the legal, economic, and political issues. I'm going to try to say something on the economic aspects and give you the framework of my thinking, and then some comment on some of the potential legal issues. The basic economic framework is this very old food policy dilemma that always governments want to have high prices for producers and low prices for consumers, and that drives a lot of the economics and the politics of these discussions. And trade policies in general face the same dilemma. So the question is, what are the systemic effects? We economists will talk about general equilibrium effects. And for that, you need to look at global models and make different assumptions about what the impact of any policy measure may be. And usually the key assumptions are those related to how you consider factors of production, particularly labor, whether they are homogeneous, highly mobile, fully employed, and so on, or they are what they call in trade factor specific. So they basically can work in only one sector and cannot move to other sectors. So if that sector is shocked, then they will be unemployed. Or in between, you will have these long transition periods of moving people from one sector to another. And so you need to consider all these welfare impacts on producers, consumers, and governments. And for that, you need these global models. And in the case of the export competitions, you need to look at in the exporting country, using the trade instrument in the directly importing country, but also the impact that they may have in other exporting and importing countries. So I'll use that framework to discuss some of the 4 topics of export subsidies, export credit guarantees and insurance, food aid, and state trading enterprises. With a colleague in IFPRI, we did an evaluation of, we had the following question in our mind. What happens if prices collapse or go down again, and then export subsidies are activated? That was a question before the Nairobi package. But it gives us an idea of what the impact may be if things had not been solved or put in a better framework in Nairobi, which all of you who are WTO members and negotiated the package should be congratulated for. So the basic thing is mostly the export subsidies are, of course, we all know, it's a sort of a, you can think about a transfer of income to the producers in the exporting country and also help consumers in the importing countries, but it's being paid by consumers or taxpayers in the exporting country and it's hurting the producers in the importing country. If you look, we did this exercise thinking if prices collapse so the export subsidies that could be used are used, what we can see is that agricultural value added expand by $12 billion in high-income countries and contracts by the same amount in middle-income developing countries and low-income developing countries. And if you look at the impact on investment in agriculture, increases in high-income countries and decreases in middle-income and low-income developing countries. And also if you look at which I don't have, I'm not presenting right here, at the wages in unskilled rural labor, it declines in middle-income developing countries and low-income developing countries if export subsidies are fully operational. So I think it's a good result that the export subsidies have been put in a framework that didn't exist before. Still, if we think in terms of the future, what are the issues that we may need to look at? It's whether the standstill and do restrain agreements will really be operational, considering that there is a high likelihood that we will face a downturn in the global economy in 2017, 2018, and that will impact on prices. So prices will come down, and there will still be the possibility of offering subsidies on dairy, on pork. Developing countries have a longer transition period. There is the 9.4 article. So I think it's very crucial, the notification and the follow-up, to make sure that in the next 2-3 years, these export subsidies that have been disciplined but didn't disappear until 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, they may still have an impact if we have this decline in prices that I think we will have. So that's my first comment in terms of export subsidies. Now, moving to export credits, guarantees, and insurance, the basic economic framework is it depends on the view that you take on the impact of these instruments. They may, if they basically reduce the full price of the product that is being exported and imported, that would operate as an export subsidy, and then the result will be the same as I mentioned before. However, there is this argument that some countries may be credit constrained, and if you are credit constrained and then you receive credit, that expands demand, and it may not be distorting. Basically, you are expanding the demand that would not have been there had not been, without the help of that credit. So it very much depends on how these two factors operate. But if you look at the countries that are receiving these export credits, usually they do not look credit constrained. So they may rather operate like export subsidies, and therefore it's good that we have a new framework I'm going through each one of these categories now, that we have a framework. And certainly I think we need to differentiate clearly what are credits, export credits and export guarantees and insurance, and particularly in export credits, the issue of interest rates, because that's not discussed in the notification or in general in the agreement. So that's one of the issues I think that we need to look closer in the next month or so. Besides having a better notification by products, countries, and markets, that not all the notifications have this clear explanation of what countries are receiving what type of credit or guarantee or insurance for what product. Besides that, the other issue is the interest rates. They are not reported in the notifications. They are not mentioned in the annex. And footnote 6 does not give the safe harbor of the OECD agreement, which we need to think about what the implication of that may be. The other point that if I remember correctly, the 2008 modalities refer to the issue of shouldn't be transfers to the government. So the issue of self-financing. But again, the notification doesn't say specifically anything about how can we monitor whether, it's only that the countries are saying, you know, this is self-financed. But how do we know that that's the case? It's not reported. The issue of self-financing as such is not explained, is not highlighted in the annex of this decision. And finally, the other point that we may need to think about is what are the implications of Note 7 that says that export credits exclude working capital to suppliers. So what are the implications of that exception may be? So those are my comments on export credits, guarantees, and insurance. Then food aid, it's sort of similar to export subsidies and guarantees. If you give food aid to someone who is so poor, before we were talking about a country that was, sorry, that's my 10 minutes, that a country that it's credit constrained, therefore it would have not been, in Keynesian terms, effective demand because you are credit constrained. In this case, food aid is supposed to be to poor people that are not effective demand because they don't have purchasing power. So if food aid goes to the poor that wouldn't have been buying food anyway, otherwise, then that is not trade distorting. The problem is that not all food aid, as you all know, is like that, and most of the or food aid tends to be procyclical. The same export subsidies tend to be procyclical. And so the worst case clearly is the case of monetization that by design is not going to the poor. Of course, it has this constraint that it has to be used for food security reasons of agricultural production and so forth, and you need a market analysis and so forth. So, and leaving aside monetization, the other disciplines in the decision that has to be needs-driven, food aid has to be needs-driven, has to be in cash form, grant, untied, not for market development, and encourage to buy locally. Those are all good disciplines, and I think they are helping. They will certainly help to frame, to make food security, food aid more focused on really the poor, poor people that will need it. Still, in terms of notifications, I think it would be useful to have the countries, when food aid is given in kind, to have a better sense of what countries are receiving what. I think my quick look at the notification of the report by the Secretariat on Transparency in Export Competition, I saw only 2 countries that mentioned the product and the markets that are being sent to. A final point on food aid, it would be nice to also look again at the G20, the financial G20 proposal of excluding food aid from export restrictions. Then I move to the more complicated issue because it's, and I don't have that much time, but just to point a couple of things. It's very difficult, the state trading enterprises, it's very difficult to do an economic analysis because they are so different. It depends on the objectives, the products, but particularly what are the operations and the powers. One thing is if you have an export trading enterprise that does quality control and checks for standards, or you do export promotion, trade fairs, advertising, branding. But other thing is if you begin, to have export-related support like transportation or shipping or packaging, etc., and even more if you are importer and exporter, and even more if you have monopoly power. So, and it's not. The decision is very weak on disciplines and very weak on notification, and therefore it's very difficult to say what the impact of this state trading enterprises may be. So the idea would be in this case, I guess, if we want to to make sure that paragraph 20, that state trading enterprises should not be used to circumvent other disciplines. And 21 that says that export monopoly should be exercised to minimize trade distortions, et cetera, I think we need a stronger notification system. Particularly, I think there is an inconsistency in, remember that originally Article 17 in GATT asked for the state-trading enterprises, among other things, should be operating on commercial conditions, under commercial conditions. And then there was this ruling on the Canadian Wheat Board and the U.S. that said that commercial conditions of commercial considerations in the operations is not a primary responsibility. It's subordinated to non-discrimination. So on the one hand, you allow the state-trading enterprises not necessarily to operate on commercial conditions, but then you have several countries and also the annex saying that you may not give information on exports and prices and markets because of commercial confidentiality. So there is an inconsistency there. Then, if you are allowed not to be commercial, then you cannot be claiming commercial considerations to not give information that you need to understand how the enterprise is working. Also, the summary statement, the annex mentions only the summary statement that provides an overview of operations. I think it would be important to know whether they are, the government may be underwriting losses or they may be financing below market rates. Some of the points that were raised in the 2008 modalities and that are not now in the disciplines right now. There are a couple of other things that we mentioned with Jonathan in the paper, so I'm not going to get into that, but related to the issue of monopoly power. Some of the metrics used to exempt monopoly power seem to be too high in several cases. So they look small, but they are not small. So I think that if that is being negotiated at some point, should be tightened up. And eventually, importing state-trading enterprises has to be put into the game because studies had shown that several of them operate at net barriers to trade. So they are really circumventing some of the import obligations under WTO. I will leave it at that. My final point would be related to the notification and enforcement. Now, countries are requested to notify according to the annex. Developing countries have 5 years to start notifying. The question in my mind is how you enforce eventually those notifications. And there is this Timothy Josling suggestion that some of the benefits from other, from the agreement on agriculture of the other should be related to the fact that whether you are notifying your operations in a clear manner or not. But that's certainly something that may or may not be discussed going forward. So that would be my remarks. I tried to give up economic framework and then try to look at, considering paragraph 4 and 5, what would be the issues that may be discussed in terms of notifications and a possible revision within 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eugenio. I think it would be also interesting to hear from you when we go into the discussion a bit more about who's really implicated in the implementation of the export subsidy decisions. Which countries, but also what do you think of the flexibilities that were also granted there to some of the countries that use export subsidies for some specific products? Let's then now turn to cotton, and we'll connect with Terry Townsend. Are you there, Terry? Can you hear us?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, very clearly. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate.
You need to wear your earpiece. Can you speak up again, Terry?
Yes, I'm here. I hear you very clearly.
Okay.
I hope you're hearing me.
Okay. Just please go ahead. You have 10-15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you for being with us.
I'm sorry that I was not able to be in Geneva for this, but I'm appreciative to the staff for allowing me to participate in this way. I have 4 points to make. 3 are contained in the paper, and a 4th I feel compelled to comment on because of an announcement this Monday by USDA. I will not use a PowerPoint because the points I'm making are fairly simple. First point is that in my opinion, U.S. cotton policy changed dramatically under the 2014 Farm Bill. The subsidies given to U.S. cotton growers are significantly less than they used to be. This doesn't mean they're zero, but they're a lot lower than they used to be. In round numbers, expenditures on the cotton program are falling from $3 to $4 billion a year. They were in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. They'll be now around $1 billion or less each year. And of that, about half will be, or is at least so far, from crop insurance, which is not crop specific. And furthermore, the revenue target on which Stack's indemnities are based or are calculated are resets every year. So Stack's does not provide insurance against a secular decline in prices. While farmers are receiving less, they are still receiving subsidies. All subsidies distort. The U.S. program is less harmful now to competing exporters than it used to be. In the broad picture, U.S. cotton production has been declining for about a decade. In the current season, production will represent 13% of world production. That's the smallest share of the world total since the invention of the cotton gin in the 1790s. A second point that I want to make regarding cotton is that the commitments in Nairobi are beneficial, but they are not of great immediate economic significance to developing countries. Export subsidies have not been provided since 2007, so banning them has no immediate impact. The benefit is that they can't be reinstated in the future if governments wanted to do so. The provision for duty-free, quota-free access for cotton and cotton products from LDCs would be significant if China agrees to grant such access. China is the only major importer that has tariffs and quotas on cotton and cotton products. The other products other than cotton, such as cotton waste, are in cotton seed meal and other products.
We lost you. Terry, sorry to interrupt. We lost you after you started talking about duty-free, quota-free to LDCs.
Okay.
Could we ask you to just go back? Sorry.
Okay, sure. Thank you for telling me. So I was mentioning that export subsidies have not been provided on upland cotton since 2007. So banning them has no immediate impact, although the benefit is that they can't be reinstated in the future. Regarding duty-free, quota-free access for cotton and cotton products from developing countries, least developed countries, China is the only major importer that imposes tariffs and quotas. So if China grants duty-free, quota-free access, it would be very important. They have not done so far. The products other than cotton that are contained on this Nairobi decision, meaning cotton waste, cotton seed meal, and other products like that, are not traded in large quantity. And so the duty-free, quota-free provision for those products is not really of commercial significance. The third point that I want to make is that in understanding what's going on in the world cotton market, you have just as Eugenio pointed out, there's a food policy dilemma. Governments want high prices for producers and low prices for consumers. The same dynamic is affecting fiber markets. Cotton's share of world fiber use has fallen from 50% in the 1980s to 27% today. Cotton consumption probably peaked in 2007-8, 27 million tons. It's 3 million tons lower today, despite 8 years of income growth and population growth around the world. And I think that years from now we'll realize that we saw peak cotton back in 2007-8. The reason for the decline is expanded world production of polyester. Cotton has to compete with polyester, both in terms of price and technical performance, fiber performance capabilities. The average price of polyester today is less than 50 cents a pound in China, and China accounts for 71% of world polyester production. In comparison, the average world price of cotton delivered to Far East mills is more than 70 cents. So you've got a spread of more than 20 cents a pound. That is enormous in a commodity industry marked by large volumes and low margins. The other big source of distortion in the cotton market today is that more than half of world stocks are held in China in the State Reserve. The State Reserve benefits farmers because it's supporting prices in the short run, but the interests of all cotton producers are being undermined by demand destruction resulting from the spread between prices of polyester and cotton that are persisting today. And the fourth point that I feel obligated to make here, this is not covered in the paper. Just Monday of this week, USDA announced a new subsidy for cotton. I think it's called the Cotton Ginning Cost Sharing Program. This is my opinion. I'm sure that U.S. government officials would not agree with this, but it seems like an example of election year pandering to the cotton sector. This is not a big subsidy. It's about $300 million. And in the terms of the U.S. industry, that's not a lot, but it sets a terrible example. I presume that USDA will argue that this new subsidy is WTO compliant because the payments that are being made this year are based on cotton area that was harvested last year. So they'll argue that this is decoupled. However, every farmer will expect that this supposedly one-time payment is going to be continued in future years. As I said, this payment is not large enough to fundamentally alter the economics of cotton production in the U.S., and it's my opinion, my evaluation that cotton area in the U.S. is going to continue to trend downward. Cotton's getting less subsidy than it used to, and because of the biofuel mandates, there's pressure. Prices for grains and oilseeds have gone up, so cotton area is trending down. Nevertheless, this subsidy will help retain some area, and the program has a terrible demonstration impact. So those are the 4 points I wanted to emphasize. Again, policy changed dramatically under the 14 Farm Bill. Commitments in Nairobi are beneficial, but they're not of great economic importance. The real challenges facing cotton today relate to distortions caused by increased polyester production and holding cotton off the market in a state reserve. And this most recent announcement by USDA of supposedly a one-time subsidy is a very bad example, but hopefully it'll be limited in impact. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you to all members for allowing me to contribute like this.
Thank you very much, Terry. Just one quick factual question from my part, so I don't remember in the agreement how it is, but you mentioned about cotton export subsidies and whether that is that's going to have an effect or not, and you said that it will be important if some specific countries undertake those cuts. Which countries are you talking about?
Well, in the past, the only country that, only two countries that have had export subsidies that affected upland cotton were the United States and India. The United States eliminated its program called Step 2 back in 2006, and there have been no U.S. export subsidies since that time. India, from time to time, has had provision with its Cotton Corporation of India, a state trading organization, where they have provided a partial or a small subsidy to offset changes in exchange rates for exporters of cotton from India. But that provision also has been eliminated or is no longer operable. And so, again, the decision in Nairobi to ban export subsidies, I think, is beneficial because neither the United States nor India nor anyone else would be able to reimpose subsidies of that nature in the future, but they've already been eliminated in practice. So banning them now does not change anything in the market today.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Okay, so let's take what do we have? Some 15 minutes to get into an exchange, at least. Let me turn the floor to the audience, but also invite both Joe Glover and Raúl Montemayor, who are with us, to make comments as you see. I haven't introduced Raúl, and Raúl is with the Federation of Free Farmer Cooperatives in Philippines, and a long-term contributor also to ICTSD work. And Joe, as Eugenio introduced before, is with IFPRI now, but formerly a U.S. negotiator, and for many years a consultant to governments on agricultural issues. So I open the floor, and feel free to both ask questions and make comments on some of these presentations if you have, or add your own views on the economic impacts particularly, but also other aspects that you may see that you want to speak about. Anybody from the floor?